Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and in this episode, after a false start, we are going to get Harry back on the road. Alright guys, well those of you who have been watching previously will have seen that I got Harry on the road as a driving car for about 15 minutes before it spewed all of the gearbox oil out all over the floor, and basically I've been sitting and waiting ever since. Basically the issue was there's a small shaft inside the gearbox that points out the nose of the gearbox that drives the speedo cable in this car, and that has fallen back into the bottom of the gearbox. I could see it with the bore scope, it's in there. A lot of you suggested that I could use a strong magnet, and I did look at trying to sort of pull it back out and connect it back up because it is clipped on from the outside, but I thought, no, let's do it properly. By the time I tear my hair out for hours trying to pull this thing through the hole and line up all the gears and get it aligned and hold it with enough tension on this tiny little piece to be able to put circlips and stuff back on it, it's just not worth the headache. It's easier to just drop the engine and replace it properly. So that is what I've chosen to do. But I ordered my parts and I thought they would be a couple of days. 3 weeks later, I've been waiting on one little circlip to come from Germany. It has been 3 weeks and it should arrive any minute. So I think it's time to get stuck into it. As you can see, even my proper plates have arrived for the car, which is 28 Luft or air in German, so it's a 2.8 air-cooled engine. That's why I named it that. I considered 28 RSR, but it's not an RSR. It's sort of inspired by one. It is a 2.8 litre engine, but it's not an RSR, so I'm not calling it that, so it's 28 Luft. Anyway, let's drop an engine. Disconnecting all the top half of the engine, it took about 10 minutes with those quick connects. Just disconnecting the fuel rails, pulling the injectors out so it doesn't leak fuel everywhere, and I've just used some clips to hold the fuel rails up out of the way. Now it's time to drain the oil. I was going to do that anyway. It's time to change it again. I want to keep changing it a few times while the engine's still fresh. So we'll dump the oil and then we can move forward on disconnecting the rest of the underside of the engine. Just remembered my hydraulic clutch, and yeah, I'm going to have to come up with an easier way to get that disconnected because it was a bit of a pain to do. So yeah, not everything is quick disconnect in this car, but anyway, let's keep going. Okay, so now the gearbox is actually out of the car. You can sort of see a little bit more clearly what I was talking about. So this is the obviously the forward part of the gearbox. This is the drive selector, the bit that goes into the cabin and changes gears. That's your reversing switch. And this here is where the speedo cable goes in, and that's where there's supposed to be a little shaft coming out with a little sort of flat, looks like a tip of a flat blade screwdriver coming out of it, that joins on with the speedo cable, and that has popped back into this end of the case. So I need to now take off the nose cone of this. And the first task is to drain the oil. So I'm going to open the fill plug first and then the drain plug. Always open the fill plug first, just because if you can't open the fill plug, you don't want to drain the gearbox of oil and you can't fill it again. All right, well, we now have the gearbox apart, and I'm having a close look at all the gears. I'm not really sure what I'm looking at. It does look like the edge of this gear here they're slightly rounded and slightly burred on the edges. I don't know if that means anything. You guys will probably know better than me, but as I said, this gearbox was acting quite nicely. That gear up there all looks nice and sharp to me. Nothing in here looks overly nasty, except for that little thing right there. That is our offender. So that little shaft is the thing that we were missing, and that sits in here in the nose, and it goes through that hole right there. It lines up like that in that hole, and is driven by that. All right, so this is the Speedo drive shaft, and after investigating further, I'm not sure how well the camera is focusing. It's not doing too bad a job. Just around this land here, it's actually broken some edges off of the land, which is why that circlip came loose. So this shaft is toast, and I'm waiting now to see if there is one in the country, or I have to wait another 3 weeks. All right, so it has been a couple of days and a haircut later, and yeah, apparently that little shaft is no longer available from Porsche. So I've got a couple of options. Basically, a viewer named Roland, actually, he's already reached out, and he's in Sydney. I've just sent the shaft off to him. He thinks he might be able to TIG it up and remachine it. I'm definitely not confident enough on the lathe to tackle that, so I've sent it off to him. So I think for now, I am sick of not actually driving this car. Apparently, the first time I started it was only going to be, I was thinking it was going to be a couple of days to get the parts in, so I sort of waited. And then it was like, oh no, they're coming from Germany, so it's going to be another few days. And that has turned into 3 weeks, so I've just sort of waiting here. And that's enough. I am actually going to make up a blanking cap to blank off that little spot, and I'm going to put the engine back in. I'm going to drive it and use my phone as a speedo for until I can sort out what I'm going to do. It's quick enough to pull this engine out now to change it over, so I'm just going to enjoy the car. I've had 15 minutes driving it since it's been registered, so let's go now, and I'll show you what I'm going to do about making a blanking cap. So first things first, I'm going to get the internal diameter of this, which is 14.8 mil, and I'll work out my depth, 13.6 mil. So that gives me a rough idea of the size I need. It doesn't have to be a press fit, so I've got a bit of room to work, which is good with my skill on the lathe, as many of you may have already seen, which is not much. All right, well, I've made my little plug up. It's not the prettiest thing. I forgot to actually do this inner face here. It doesn't matter at all. I've got a little spike on the back here. Again, it doesn't matter. I'll just knock that off. But it can stay there. It's not going to interfere with anything. But it fits beautifully onto my seal. And that seal is still in good condition. I'm going to reuse this one. I've got a new one that should be here any minute, but I'm going to save that for when I actually put the proper thing back in again. That is going to seal up nicely and stop my gearbox from leaking, so I can put it all back together again. Yeah! A nice plug in place. That is not going to leak. And this is the end of the new Speedo cable. I'll just screw that in place. That will lock it in there, and it's not going to go anywhere. And we'll have a sealed gearbox. So time to reassemble. All right, well, while I'm under here anyway, I suppose I've actually got myself a flex cable for the clutch line, so I'm going to cut off the hard line either end, put a couple of fittings into it, and fit a flex line into this space, so it makes it easier to get the slave cylinder in and out. right, well, I have my flex line fitted. I tried to do it quickly without draining the clutch fluid. I thought I could do it fast enough so that I might save myself a little bit of time draining the system and bleeding it again. And I ended up messing up this second flare. I did what most people usually, the main mistake that most people do when they're making these things is I didn't put the fitting on first. I made the flare and then I realized I didn't put the fitting on. I do it every time. It still gets me. Anyway, it's done now. We have a flex line in here, so that should be good for the future. Put a lot of people's minds to rest when they were worried about this line work hardening. So moving forward, I'm going to remove this old Speedo cable. I want to probably try and attach a string or something to the other end, so when I pull it out, I pull the string through so that I can pull the new one back in again. It makes it much easier than trying to fish something through without. So let's give that a go. New Speedo cable's in. I did a quick bleed of the clutch while it was in the air, but I'll do it properly once everything's all back together again. So I think it's time now to actually stick the engine back in the car. I'm not going to fill the gearbox while it's down here because the engine's on an angle. I want to get it back in and get it flat again, and it's sort of on an angle because it needs to be angled up to get the shaft of the gearbox into the tunnel. So I'll do it when it's all flat. So all right, let's get it back in. All right, the engine is back in the car and everything is bolted up. So the next thing I'm going to tackle is refilling that gearbox with oil, and fingers crossed it actually stays in it this time. All right, and the last thing I need to do before I can actually start the car, I've got another tune from Adam at Link. He's sorted out the cold start a fair bit more, so it should be a fair bit better now. And also, he's changed the ramping of the accelerator because I sort of found the throttle was so sensitive at low revs, I was sort of bunny hopping along. So he's changed the ramping for the first 50% of the throttle, so it's just a little bit more gradual throttle input. So we'll upload it now and see how it goes. All right, I've gone over, I've checked everything, it all looks good, so I think it's time to start it up for the first time in several weeks and see how it goes this time. That cold start seemed pretty smooth. Seems to be starting and idling reasonably nicely and happily, not blowing heaps of smoke. It actually looks pretty good. So I think it's time to go and give it a quick test on the road and see how it's driving. And it works, it's running. So we actually have it on the road again, finally. I mean, no Speedo, but I can use my phone for the time being and I will get it sorted. I still only have 3/4 throttle. I'll give you my full driving sort of review of it, hopefully next video, as long as, touch wood, everything keeps running the way it's supposed to. So I'm so looking forward to actually being able to get more of a drive in it. So if you're enjoying the videos, please do all that things, like and subscribe and do all that sort of stuff. Join us on Patreon and watch the videos a day early, ad-free. And make sure if you need any parts for your Porsches, check out PorschePartsByJeff.com and compare prices there first. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.